Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. This is John Mickton. I'm your co-host at the International Schools podcast. Dan is away this week. One of the things that many of us in the winter season, so it depends where you are on Earth. Some people in the Southern Hemisphere are in full summer, but often we get sick, you get a cold, you get some flu, and you have to stay home. And this happens also in school settings and in professional settings. And what often can happen sometimes is that sickness or illness can take much longer for a person to recover. And there's that distance and break from the workplace. And specifically here, we're going to be talking about schools. And what does that mean for a student that can't be at school and is starting to miss school? And the academics, the social, emotional, the connections with the friends, what does that do? And what are some of the challenges? And all of us as educators and even professionals, when we have a teammate or a colleague that's away, somebody has to take on some of their work, and you definitely notice that there's that gap. And having that connection, and especially if you're the person that's away, when you come back, it just feels like a hamster wheel because you're trying to catch up. People are trying to bring you up to speed. And there's just this sense of frenzy. And what can you do? And how can organizations and schools maybe mitigate some of that? And that's why we have our guests here today from No Isolation. And I want to first introduce Simone Isaacs, who is the Director of Customer Success at No Isolation. And she works closely with schools across Europe to support the implementation of AV1. And we're going to learn more about AV1, which is a telepresence robot. It's really a solution designed to maintain learning and belonging during students' absences. Simone has 28 years of experience in schools and alternative provisions, from classroom teacher to head teacher, and working strategically with local authorities. Simone now focuses on helping schools structured, student-centered approaches to continuity, well-being, and belonging and reintegration. Simone, thank you so much for being part of this podcast today.
Thank you for asking us. We're very excited to talk to you about AV1.
And with her for emotional support is Carina Schmitz, who is the Director of Global Marketing. And she is based in Germany, and she is working with a lot of schools and the international market and supporting No Isolation with their marketing and their customers and connections and doing a lot of work in the background. Carina, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. And just a tiny correction, I'm actually part of the global marketing team and not the director, but yes, I'm indeed localized in Munich, so I'm focusing on the German market in a global context. Thank you, John, for having us.
You're welcome. And sorry I called you director. Your boss is going to be calling me up and saying,
"That'll be fine for
her." Anyway, so first of all, thank you both for being here. It's wonderful. And I think really kind of the thing that would be interesting, Simone, is maybe to talk about the origin story of No Isolation, because it's kind of interesting. And then also, what were you trying to solve?
So No Isolation was sort of founded by Karen Dolver and Marius Arabel and Matthias about 10 years ago. It was October 2015 that they actually sort of came up with the idea. And the mission was to eliminate involuntary loneliness. So those children who are forcibly away from school through no fault of their own, be it illness or anxiety or all of those things, the main thing is that they feel isolated, and sort of the origin of the story was that it was inspired by a mother who lost her daughter to cancer, sadly, but then she described that actually alongside the cancer, a really major issue for her child was the fact that her child felt so isolated from her school and her friends and her community, because not only if she was dealing with a really awful illness, she didn't have that kind of normalcy, if you like, because she just physically couldn't be there. So from that, the AV1 was kind of imagined and made and founded, and we like to say we're using warm technology to keep young people, students, connected, not only educationally, I would say education almost comes second, but actually it is about that connection, that belonging, and the sociability that you miss when you're all your friends are at school and you're not. So that's the beginning of no isolation, and here we are, sort of 10 going on 11 years later, still going.
Fantastic. So one of the things that you used as a term, which I'd love to hear more about, is this idea of warm technology, because generally technology is not associated with the idea of warmth, because of it often is inorganic materials, machines, metal, and there's, the whole narrative around social media and loneliness, and there's not this sense of warmness. So maybe talk to us a bit about why you call it warm technology.
So the difference between using an AV1 telepresence solution and sort of accessing a classroom, for example, through a medium like this, through Google or Teams, is that we wanted to make the AV1 the physical representation of the child. So it can actually sit in the child's chair, it can sit on the table, it's fully portable. It's got a 360-degree moving, it hasn't got legs, it doesn't walk, but it sits on the table and its head can move around, up and down, the body moves. It's the child's voice that comes through the avatar. So it's actually, like I said, the physical representation of the child in the classroom. And because you don't have to sort of join via a link or anything like that, because it's a live stream, so effectively, it is the child speaking directly to their friends, to their peers, to their teachers. There's no need to kind of send a link out. It's not on a screen, all of those sorts of things. And the avatar is only about 30 centimeters tall, so it can go out for break time, for play time. It can go to the activities that don't strictly need a classroom based, so things like school trips or lunch or any of those things. So you're actually embracing the whole of the school day, which is what the child would miss, rather than just, I don't know, geography or maths, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. And actually, I got to witness one. That's actually how I connected with you. I saw in a classroom one being used for a student that had a long-term absence. And when I saw that, and actually, I'll be honest, I misunderstood, because I thought, and a bit like the kids, very likely when they see it, they think, oh, it's an AI robot. But Carina, you kind of corrected me, and I'd love you also to correct the audience, because I think, I'm sure you get that a lot as you're marketing this product to customers. They think that it's an AI robot. And I think that's an important distinction to understand about the background technology. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yes, very happy to do so. So yeah, I think the main thing to keep in mind here that AV1 is a telepresence robot. So we're speaking about telepresence technology here. So it has nothing to do with artificial intelligence. So the robot is really just like the physical representative of a child in the classroom. So the robot, as a hardware, it can do nothing on its own. So it's like fully like in charge of like the child, who is actually connected to the hardware via tablet or through our AV1 app. So it's just like proven that when a child has like a physical representative in the classroom, it's also easier for their classmates to actually, got to remember that, there is like someone missing, but hey, this person is suddenly not missing because they are like right in front of us. They are right in the middle of our classroom. And also, as the robot has some functions like a blinking head, it is like lighting green, then the child can like make clear and they want to raise their hands. So it's also more interaction rather than, unmuting and speaking. And this also helps to like feel more connected to their peers. So yeah, that's, I think, important to remember here.
Yeah, that is, because I think so often, especially today, in this context, we would assume that AI would be infused. There would be a large language model in there embedded and things like that. And I think that's maybe, Simone, where this term warm technology comes about, because Carina, you said something really important, is that the child really is in control of it. It's not a third party. And was that on purpose? Is that because you have this clear philosophy and that AI really doesn't have a role in this machine?
No, because the machine, like we were saying, is representing the child who, in order to keep safe, can't physically be there, but actually can be there in a safe way. Because, you know, so many of these young people struggle to get across the threshold, or are not allowed to go across the threshold, not allowed to socialize because of their illness. So, you know, being able to be as much of themselves as they can with a conduit of a robot body, if you like, it's as much as we can do to make that child there as much as we can safely without them actually being there, if that makes sense. So yeah, no, there's no AI involved in the robot or the app.
Yeah, and I think I think it's important in this age where there's agentic AI, and people would assume that an organization would be focusing on that. Carina, you also talked about the app and the connection. So this is done through a Bluetooth. How is the live stream? What is kind of the technology for the signal? You need a Wi-Fi network or an Ethernet network. Is that correct?
I'm happy to briefly answer on this, but actually Simone is like super expert on this. So yeah, we have an own developed app, which is called AV1 app, and you can connect the device through this app. But actually, yeah, this is like one of Simone's like core cases.
Okay, sorry. Well, thank you for helping out. So Simone, tell us a bit about the technology behind it.
So the student will have an app which they'll download onto a tablet or a phone, wherever they are, home, hospital, maybe even in a different room on site. That app then speaks to the robot, if you like. It connects the robot to the app, so it's a one-on-one sort of connection. The robot works on Wi-Fi, or they all have 4G SIM cards in them, so they can. Yeah. So if the Wi-Fi fell out for any reason, it would automatically pick up on the 4G. So there's very, very little chance of connectivity dropping. And obviously the young person's at home and they would connect to their tablet however they would normally connect through their Wi-Fi. So yeah, it's just a simple app talking to robot Wi-Fi connection. It's very simple.
Nice. I mean, I think the simplicity is something that very likely is really helpful, because often when you have these technologies that I mean, even with Google Meet and Zoom, there are always some problems, and then you can't do it. And it kind of generates a level of stress, maybe, especially for educators and classrooms or parents that are dealing with a child with long absence. There are many other things that very likely are priorities, and having to fiddle and trying to connect with this, that really can be quite challenging. Can you tell us, maybe either of you, and I'll let you decide, you know, what experience, or there's a moment, because you're seeing your customers or your clients and your students or whoever it might be, and tell us about a moment where you think this technology genuinely changed the shape of a student's day while they were absent.
So I was thinking about this when we were doing all of our sort of pre, to and fro, if you like. And I think what's important to know is that I was a customer before I became the customer success director. So I actually so when I was working at my local authority, after I'd done 20 something years of teaching, I actually was just presented with 10 robots, because I led what we call in the UK the medical education team in my local authority. So we obviously we arrange education for children who can't attend school for whatever reason. And I was just presented with 10 robots, and I was like, what are these? What do these do?
Point of clarification, Simone, these are the AV ones then?
The AV ones,
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
So my manager was like, well, you know, you're running the medical education team now. These might help. I was like, do you want to give me some more examples? Do you want to talk more about this? I've got no idea. But I very quickly realized that this was a no-brainer. If I'm honest, absolute no-brainer compared to all of the other interventions that we had at our disposal. This this ticked more boxes in one sort of intervention, if you like. So I started off with 10, and I very quickly built my fleet of robots up to 50 in my local authority. So I have been able to work with the schools myself, work with the robots myself, and now I'm on the other side of the table, if you like. So I was thinking about this question, so I'm going long-winded way around it. This is what I do, and I was thinking very specifically of a young person that I worked with when I was in my local authority, and she was in her final year, and she needed to take her exams, her end of year exams, in June. But she hadn't been able to attend her school for the last 2 years properly because she was really suffering with anorexia. She was incredibly poorly. So she was too weak to actually attend lessons. However, she really wanted to achieve. She really wanted to focus. And she was, very bright girl. But physically, it was just too much for her to go to school. So we put an AV1 in place for her. And she spent the last, so I think it was about 8 months before her exams, going in when she could, when she was well enough, but actually when she wasn't well enough, or even halfway through a day, she'd go home and she would switch to learning in present in the classroom, but not in person in the classroom. So she was getting all of her quality first teaching. She was getting all of that like live interaction with her class, and all of the content, but actually keeping her health as healthy as she could be in those last 8 months. When it came to exams, and it really makes me smile because I'll always remember, between me and members of our team, we go around her house, pick her up and drive her to have her exam to make sure she got there. And she passed every single one of those exams. Fantastic. Every single one. Yeah. Wow. And they were delighted. We were all delighted. It was such a success story. And she was able to then have choices, post her education at school. She was able to have choices. She was able to do that whilst focusing on trying to get better as well. So, that's just one example. I've got hundreds I can imagine. Talk about.
Yeah, but that's a great story. And I think also sometimes illness, anorexia is maybe a great example of something that can be super challenging for young people, and actually very likely not that uncommon sometimes for certain types of kids, especially young ladies. Not that men don't get anorexia, but I think often at that age that can be quite challenging. Carina, when you are going and marketing this, do you use certain stories? Do you have like a bucket of stories that you go into to convince people, or what is kind of the strategy that, when you're talking to German schools?
So for sure, we do have on our website online like several case studies which are focusing on different types of schools, or also different kinds of like use cases. So we are not, AV1 is not only being used when there is like some illness that, has broken out, but also in terms of, for example, early intervention. If you can see then that there is like the risk of someone who is like suffering from school anxiety, that you can help them, to maybe step back a little bit for a while, and then, gain the confidence and maybe go on therapy or so to regain the strength to, physically attend school again. So, and I think this is also important to mention. I mean, to be honest, sometimes it's also really hard because sadly there are also children who have passed away during their time when they used the AV1. But like, of course, we do hope, and the AV1 is developed as a tool being used for a specific time frame. So it should help children to actually return to school. So this is why, for example, we definitely also recommend to not, wait too long to take the opportunity to use this tool to prevent school non-attendance, even in a very early stage, for example. And also, of course, AV1 is, being picked up in the media, because if you do have like a specific case, or like in other words, a child who is in need or was in need to use AV1, then you can really get, a better like feeling and idea around what it's actually, what it's mean, to be absent from school. And then there is like a really plug and play tool you can use within maybe 1 week, and then you're finally back to school. And if you hear those children and also parents or teachers, what's the actual impact of the tool, it's just like, I would say it's, even after 5 years within this organization, it's like overwhelming every single time.
Wow. And what's really interesting, you brought up this idea of also early intervention, making sure of taking advantage of that. And also maybe more of what I would say a sad note is that unfortunately, some of these kids that are absent then pass away. So that also is, the tool is there to help whatever the condition, but sometimes those conditions can come to a somewhat tragic end. And but those are great anecdotes about the idea that it's plug and play. I think that's something that's really important that you brought up, Carina, is because so often that can be a challenge. So go ahead, Simone.
Sorry, John, to interrupt you, but
not at all.
I was going to say that was purposeful when we were developing this, because educators, teachers, people who work in schools are so incredibly busy, and we often find that there's a lot of do this, it's the new thing, it's the new technology, the new intervention, the new set of books or whatever it is, and often teachers are a bit like exasperated, aren't they? They're a bit like, not something else that I've got to learn.
Absolutely.
I've got to put in my... But with the AV1, because it is a live stream, because the child, to all intents and purposes, is actually in the lesson, all the teacher needs to do is switch it on. If there's sort of work that needs to go alongside it, yes, email it to the child at home and they can work alongside it. Obviously, they can't write through an AV1, but there is very little pre-prep. There's very little sort of additional work that needs to be done by the teacher, bar the teacher accepting that is the physical representation of the child. So you don't even have to, like even with Google, you have to create a link and send it. You don't have to do any of those things.
Yeah.
So that's
absolutely, the ease, and as Carina was saying, this idea of plug and play, and your point, which I think is an important one, teachers often, and rightly so, might have some cynicism to a new tool. They've gone through a few, or new pedagogy. I think those things are really important that you highlight. And a teacher's day is a very busy day when you have 30 plus kids in the classroom. As many public schools do. International schools are often a little luckier, smaller numbers, but still you're full on. It's a full on day and things always come in the way. So if I'm a teacher at a school and I come to your organization and I say, well, we have the student, they're going to be away for months. What are the first 3 things you tell that teacher or that school? If somebody knocks on your door and says, we heard about you, we saw the ad, or maybe they talked to Carina at first or you. What are the first 3 things you want them to clearly understand before they engage with this? So there are no expectations or suddenly like, well, that was not in the fine print.
Well, in my experience, I think the very first and important thing that I would need to know from the school actually is whether they really want to do it. Because sometimes schools and teachers it's suggested to them rather than it's something they really want to do. And I always say, if you want to use this and you think it's going to work, it's absolutely going to work, because it's a mindset. So I think that's really important to understand. And what you said earlier, John, as well, about there will be some teachers who will be skeptical about it. There will. So maybe not start it with them. Maybe start it with somebody. I was always the teacher in the school that if anything new came into the school, I'd be like, me, I want to do this, I want to do that. So maybe find that teacher first to embed it, because it is a new thing and people will be skeptical and people will be a bit doubtful at times. So it's always about having that positive mindset to embed it in the first instance. The second thing is to have a very good conversation with your staff team to introduce it as the staff team. And again, that will sort of pick out the staff who are really keen to make the change. And thirdly, to practice with it for a couple of days before the student gets on board live, because, you know, it is something new. There will be things like, had you thought about how to get it from science to geography in 5 minutes? Who's doing that bit? You know, are you having a buddy, a school buddy? Are you having a teaching assistant buddy? Have you tried the Wi-Fi? I have a school here that I was working with. There's Wi-Fi in all of the front classrooms. Perfect. The AV one worked perfectly there. And it was actually geography. I think that's why it's always in my mind. But the geography lesson was in a corner at the back, and they could not get Wi-Fi it was just a dead spot. And they hadn't realized that until they tried to put the AV1 in there. So it's things like that, just, you know, so that things don't get thrown off course early on. It's just that kind of putting it in place in the first instance. But yeah, it's those three things really. It's about preparation and being. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long to prep, but actually thinking about the prep before you throw it into action.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point also of making understanding that everything works before you onboard the child and your classroom is so important, because these things, you know, you might have Wi-Fi, as you gave an example of, but then there's that one room that has the dead spot. So I think that's so important. Carina, when you talk to people, what's the biggest misconception they have when you have your first call, or you know, you're talking to them, because you're going out to sell this to people and you're marketing this also through social media or whatever channels you might use. What's the biggest misconception you keep getting about this?
I would say, especially in Germany, we do have, we always need to keep in mind the topic of data protection. Okay. So this is very often like asked, and like we're very happy and confident to say that when it comes to data protection, we are GDPR, how do you call it? It's
compliant.
Like DSGVO-konform in German.
Yeah,
So,
you're GDPR compliant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, GDPR is not an issue for us. That's very important to state right from the beginning. Also, for example, when we are talking about you know, being connected to the robot, it's only connected as live stream, right? So there is nothing being recorded, for example. This is also very important to mention. And also, I would just love to get back to your previous question quickly, because maybe also like a nice little story. I was also talking, you know, back in the days to a teacher from a primary school, and they were like, really, okay, sometimes, you know, you just have to face the fact, for example, that in the, I don't know, first few days, children will be amazed by the robot, and they will be like, oh my God, what is this? Can I touch it? You know, But then, you know, I mean, children are curious, and that's just beautiful and normal. But then after a few days, for example, we see often that the robots get like personalized, you know, so they get like little stickers on it, or maybe a necklace or glasses or whatsoever. And then you pretty like soon, you know, there is a connection being made that this is not like, you know, a robot or like a spacey thing, but it's actually the representative of, I don't know, someone, Paul, Anna. So this is, you know, and this, I think this transition time, you know, besides the technical preparation, you just, you know, take those few days and just, you know, wait and give it a bit of time, and then it's going to be fine in the end.
I love this idea, the way the kids start putting stickers and necklace, and it's because you know, I think many of us that work in education, kids are quickly to personalize their AI chatbot or Siri, or even be Alexa. They'll say she, you know, I talk to her every day. So I think that's really interesting, that transition that you shared, Carina, of, you know, from the technical and then more the human touch, making it personal and owning it as such. I think that's so interesting. So you have, the initial thought was for long-term medical absences, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you've also used it for emotionally based school non-attendance, which is not medical. I mean, it's a type of medical, but usually social, emotional well-being issues.
Yep.
And what's the most common mistake you think people make when a child can't attend school and they start reacting to that? What is the biggest mistake that you think you see? Because you come in and suddenly provide a solution. You're saying, well, listen, guess what? We can alleviate this absence and this lack of connection. As you started in the beginning, this anecdote that one of the things that founders, the story that you talked about was this child had cancer, but one of the challenges was the isolation of that journey and not having those connections. So that's something that you bring in. But what is maybe the biggest misconception schools and educators have about this absence, be it for emotionally based non-attendance or actually long-term illness?
So I think it's really key to say that that the AV1 does different. It almost does different things for different reasons, if I make sense. So a lot of the time we find. So to step back, we are finding that using AV1 for emotionally based school non-attendance is really huge now. It was, like you said very clearly, it was originally, physical illness was what it was devised for. But we are seeing that it's probably overtaking it now, that using it for emotionally, because that's very prominent, and actually it probably accounts for more school absences than physical absences now, in the UK, incredibly. But so for physical absence, I think it's very easy to understand as educators and students and parents and people that child can't go to school because they've got an illness, a physical illness that we understand, and so therefore they can still go to the classes until they're better, and then they can go back to school. So it's kind of quite a straightforward. They're ill, they can connect, they get better, they go back. The difference between a physical illness sort of concept and the emotionally based school non-attendance is that it's not quite so easy to see that, if that makes sense. So I think that's where the early intervention comes into its own as well, because we do know that the sooner you intercede into a child who's wobbling, maybe the less likely it's going to progress into a really serious sort of persistent non-attendance. So we say to schools now and educators now, you're the experts, you know your children better than we don't know them, we're not there, but actually you will know those children that you think, oh, hang on a minute, something's not right here, something's triggering this, then they're beginning to drop off, they're beginning to wobble. And at that point, the AV1 can be used as an early intervention tool. When you get to the point where young people are so entrenched in their emotionally based school non-attendance, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I think the main message that I convey to schools with regard to this is that the AV1 is a connection. It's a bridge back, but it's a slow process. It's a reintegration tool. And I think schools and generally they just want those children back in school. They just want them back. And I think that sort of managing their expectations that it's going to be a straightforward journey is the bit, because, the longer you're off, the bigger the anxiety is and the bigger the barrier is to get back in. So it's all about having those really clear planning meetings, those open and honest conversations with the family, the student and the schools, and being realistic with your expectations. So I always say, if you've got a young person who's been off, who hasn't been to school for 3 months, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. That young person, as far as they're concerned, in their head, the school might not even look the same as when you left. And I liken it to when as a teacher, you're off for the 6-week summer holiday and everybody's off. So there's no one in the school, but going back after 6 weeks is still a bit scary, even though everyone else has been off. Imagine if all your friends are there and you haven't been there, and times that by 100 to be a young person who's been off for 3 months. It's it's incredibly difficult for them. So we talk about a structured and graduated approach. So it could be that, you know, the young person might identify a trusted adult in that school, and they might just dial in with their mum at their side and just say hello, week 1. That's it. But that's 100% progress from last week when they didn't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is more, I think it's more tricky and a different mindset for emotionally based school attendance, because non-attendance rather, because it is not a straight line. It doesn't make sense. You will always have the blips, but it's about having those conversations, that planning, that reviewing. And as long as you're seeing progress, it doesn't matter what the progress is, right? You're doing.
Absolutely. If you're having progress, even little pieces of progress make a big difference. I think it's interesting that you brought up and highlighted the difference, because I think, say, a kid breaks a leg. We all know what a broken leg looks like. But if you talk about a child that has anxiety or even maybe fits of paranoia, that's much more nuanced, and very likely, generally, people know the term, but what comes around it and the complexity of it and what are the symptoms, and everybody deals with it differently, that makes it much more complicated. Now, the way you're describing this, I assume, maybe Carina, you can also jump in here. When you sell one of these things, how much after sales is there? How much time do you have like a year contract? You know, I mean, it's like, you know, there's like, if you buy a pair of headphones, you have 2 years warranty, but it's not like you're talking to the company or anything. It's just if they break, you can send them back. I'm just curious, how much of a relationship do you continue developing post sale of the item? And Carina, go ahead.
Well, actually, yeah. So that's my team's job. That's what we do.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got account managers and we've got customer success managers, and the account manager owns the customer commercially, but we work as a team. So the customer success we will go out, we will do onboarding, we will do training with the school. They've got a dedicated person. Each customer's got a dedicated person that they can contact if they need us. We proactively reach out to them at least 3 times a year. You know, we can offer relaunch, we can offer training, we can offer whatever the school needs to make this a success. With you know, most of my team are teachers. I've got and when they're not teachers, they're incredibly experienced in the AV1 itself and the education system. So we get schools, we get what's going on. The AV1s themselves come with a warranty and a service package. So although you've bought the AV1 itself, which is the robot, for want of a different of an explanation, the software gets updated regularly. That, you know, if it gets broken, it gets replaced. You've got a warranty like you would have with your headphones, but you've also got people.
Yeah.
You've got people who are there for you the whole time, for the entire life cycle of that customer. We're there.
That's fantastic, because I think when you're dealing with the social, emotional, or even medical issues, there's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of challenges. And if the actual AV1, has issues, be it technical or whatever, it's just nice to know you have that support system out there. So yeah, that's fantastic. Carina, go ahead.
I can share maybe something, because of course, like, we're working in different teams, but still we're working very aligned and very closely together. So, for example, maybe this is especially interesting for you in the environment of international schools. I recently had an interview with one of our customers. So he's a teacher, but also part of the school administration of a German school in Spain. And besides all of the impact of AV1 and its value and benefits, he also shared something that is especially relevant for international schools, because he said, for example, main subjects like, for example, math, and those lessons are taking place in German. And, sometimes you have a child who, maybe because the child lives in Spain, and maybe also, I don't know, its family is maybe not fluent or native in German, the international school is the only place where the child get in contact with this foreign language. And he said, if or with the help of AV1, those childs still have, a connection to this language. Because just imagine you're off like sick for a while, and it's like a couple of weeks. You're not only miss, the lessons, but you miss the connection to this language.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is something where he just pointed it out, why he's such a big fan of AV1.
That's a great anecdote, because I think, especially as you said, Carina, in international school setting, many of the students are not native to the language that maybe they're being taught in. As the example that you gave, a student at a German school in Spain might not both have German parents, and one might be a Spanish speaker or some other country. So that's really interesting. And I think this is what both of you are saying, is this connection is more than just a teleprompter or telepresence, but there's also a whole social, emotional, psychological, and that kind of package it comes with it, and the experiences not only the child but the classmates and the teachers are experiencing, that really almost creates a community. I'm wondering, what's the difference between owning an AV and using it well?
Well, it will be the outcomes and the impact. I mean, you can have an AV1, but if you're not using it, it's not helping the young people, right? It's not making the impact that you want to make it. I always say, you have to use it, but you don't have to. You can use it how you want. You don't have to use it just for physical illness or just for Ebsner. And if you want it to be embedded in your school and you want it to be part of the fabric of a school, you need to use it. You need to use it for whatever reason. And I was actually just thinking as well, John, sorry, going back to what Carina was saying about international schools specifically, and sort of linking to this as well. If you've got an AV1 and you haven't got a young person that's sick, but you've got a young person that their family may have moved, because I think, lots of families do move around to spend, and that's why they go to international schools, right? A lot of the time, because they are, geographically mobile. Say, for example, a family had to move before the end of the school year in the country that they were in. Well, they could just finish off their school year in that school from a different country to avoid 2 lots of transition and 2 lots of upheaval, and just dial in through the AV1. It's just it's just mind-blowing to me that all of these different uses for it. It just lends itself beautifully to that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is, as you're describing, both of you, it's this kind of versatility and this multi-dimension that it can be in different contexts. And really, it wasn't designed, it was designed for this long-term illness, as you told us at the beginning. But now, as you're describing all the different scenarios, it is quite multifaceted. And I think that's what's so interesting. And it's also about the ingenuity of the children and the teacher in the classroom, how they leverage that, how do they think out of the box, like you said, let's take it to the cafeteria for lunch, let's take it to the band room or whatever else, even take it to PE. I've
got quite an interesting story. I hope it's all right to sort of share this.
Of course, yeah.
When I was working in our local authority, like I said, I had 50, and some of them used to live at my house just because it was easier for me to keep them here and deliver them. So I sort of regularly had 8 or 9 under my stairs. And I remember vividly sitting here one evening, and my local school where my children went to, actually just up around the corner, one of the teachers rang me up and she was like, I hope you can help. I hope you can help. And I was like, oh my goodness, what's happened? And she said, we've got one of our year 6s, sort of the last sort of 11. They were off on school journey. They were off for the following week to do a residential trip. They're all going together, that sort of year 6 thing. And this poor child had been playing football that evening, fallen over and broken their leg so badly that they were in hospital. So the school rang me up and they were like, that they can't go on the school trip straight away. They're having their leg cast, but they really want to go. Can an AV1 come on the school trip until such a time as that this child's mum can drive her up? And so the AV1 went, and the AV1 sat on the coach. And the AV1 went to campfire, but the young person was like having their leg cast and had to be at home for a couple of days, but was dialing in and doing the stories around the campfire, was watching
Fantastic.
the activities and talking to her friend on the coach, which was brilliant. So I just ran an AV1 up to the school at 8:30 at night and said, there you go. Brilliant.
You never know when you need an AV1 in the bottom of your staircase, right? I mean, it's like we all have one. Carina, this is a great marketing tool. You need to have one. You never know when you need it, you know?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should talk later on, Simone.
Yes, indeed.
Carina, do you have competition in Germany? Who else is doing the same thing as you?
No one.
No one.
So
Really?
there are other telepresence robot or telepresence tools, but actually, I mean, AV1 is not only developed but still being produced also in Norway, and also AV1 app is developed by ourselves. So it's all out of one hand solution. And until today, there is really no other brand company or solution who is offering the very same thing. So a very niche, very specific, very proven product. Yeah.
Excellent. So you've been talking about all the wonderful things about AV1, and which is wonderful, and there's some great anecdotes, and I think also the nuances of how you deal with them, and different contexts and different physical settings all have to come into play. What are some challenges that you've faced with this technology? What are some pushbacks that maybe you've had, or things people are like, yeah, I don't want this thing, take it back? I'm being a little.
We very rarely get, I don't want this thing, take it back. But because once they've embraced it, they figure it out. I don't have to do anything more. They just love it. But the main challenge, I guess, is actually what Carina said. We get a lot of pushback about safeguarding, and teachers thinking that. And rightly so, because teachers do, like we said, they're very busy, they're overwhelmed, but they kind of think originally and initially, until you've actually sat down and had a proper conversation about it, a lot of teachers assume that they're being spied on, that they're being judged or sort of monitored via the AV1, because again, they don't really quite understand it's a live stream and it's just the child on the end of it, and I think that just comes from a teaching environment and being sort of monitored and recorded and tracked and assessed and all of those things, and they just don't want another sort of thing in the classroom. But a lot of that comes from lack of understanding, and once you sort of frame it in, it's not about the teachers, it's about the child's emotional well-being. At the end of the day, and you're not being recorded, it can't be recorded, it can't be screenshot, none of those things can happen. So it is tied up with safeguarding and that kind of feeling of being watched. But really, I think that's the main challenge. The main challenge is actually reassuring staff and I always say, physically and metaphorically holding your hand through this, because once you get it, I think you'll find it's absolutely fine, and you can see just how much impact and it makes for the young person. And at the end of the day, that's what we have to be monitoring and tracking is, has it had a positive impact for that young person? And if it has, then it's a win-win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Carina.
Maybe also adding to this, as an example, how we have taken customer feedback into account. So, for example, AV1's function to raise their hands so that the head is starting to blink. So it used to be like a white light, and in the past, customers reached out to us and said, it's not really good visible in the classroom, so you can hardly see the white blinking light. So we took this into account and we changed it, for example, to a green blinking head with changing. So I think this is also just nice to see that we are in such a close contact with our customers, and we're really trying, to make the best out of this product for for the children and for the teachers and for everyone. So it's not that, we are designing this tool in a way that we are happy with it, but like the people who are actually working with this tool are happy. So this is what I really like about us.
So I think, you brought this up, Carina, and then Simone too, is this idea that with AI and smartphones and social media, this idea of data surveillance, and I think people just assume if you put a digital tool inside your room, chances are it's going to record. That's just the assumption. And the assumption is pretty right generally. If you're on a Chromebook or on a laptop or whatever, everybody's watching what you're doing and you leave a digital footprint. But I think what's really important also is that there's no video, right? There is just a voice. So that's another thing where there's no image sharing or anything like that. It's just the voice going back and forth, which I think, is really important. Yeah. So your company is in Norway. You're a smallish company. There's a staff photo and there, and it looks like a very happy group of people. What is the kind of mindset of the people that you want to be part of that? Because I assume you very likely must have child psychologists. I mean, I'm just wondering what is the dispositions you're looking for when people come on board? Of course, you must have developers and people that do the kind of more the mechanical and engineering, but so much of this is about philosophy, about pedagogy. It's about child safety. It's about well-being. What are kind of the dispositions of what you look for in people, or what is kind of the vibe amongst yourselves?
So we have different, like you're correct. We have like an engineering team, we have the product team, we have all different teams within our company, but of course they're not very big because our company is nice. I mean, what are we 56 now, Carina? I think it's about that. It might be
below 60, yeah.
Below 60, yeah, we're definitely below 60. So I'm in my team, John. I look for because we are customer success. I like to have educators in my team because in my experience as an educator and working in a local authority, I didn't take too kindly to people coming into my classroom telling me that this is a great thing who've never been in a classroom. So I think it's very important to have that point of reference. Schools and education, we talk our own language, really. And I think you have to have some kind of understanding of that language and how to relate to educators, because it is a very unique setting. When you're an educator, unless you've been an educator, I think, you don't really fully comprehend what's going on. So I do try to recruit and in my team specifically, people who have an understanding of education in a variety of capacities, a variety of roles. But we also, we want people who really buy into our mission. The reason we work at No Isolation is because we truly believe that we can make a difference to children. So you have to have that mission to do it. You have to believe in what we're doing. So really, I guess, people who buy into the mission is our mindset and behavior. Carina, is there anything you want to add to that? I mean, that's all I can say.
I can completely underline what you just said. It's, of course, like we're all like really highly skilled in our areas, but at the same time, like we are so many different kind of personalities, but we're really aligned of being so purpose driven. And during the past 5 years, I can really tell that we're all working from different countries and different teams with a different skill set, but still, like, we're just like, every time someone is sharing like a story from an 81 user or even like a parent, like, reached out to us. So sometimes parents are reaching out to us just to say thank you, thank you for giving us this opportunity, for giving my child this opportunity. We're just like, oh, okay, made my day, So I think at this point we're all the same.
Excellent. Would you say parents buy into this much quicker than schools?
That's a really interesting question. I think when because it's tricky, because it depends on whether the parent has seen us and gone back to the school and said, I've seen this really cool thing, can you look into it? Or whether in my case, when I was in the local authority, I was the one going, this is what we're offering, so. And I think majority, I would say a majority of the parents, once they understand what it is and how it can actually positively impact their child, they buy in like that. Because of course, why wouldn't you want your child to be in a position where they feel comfortable, connected, can have all of those experiences that may have been taken away from them through no fault of their own. So, yes, they do. I
agree. So also, most of the times, like, parents are, probably a mixture between like passionate and desperate in order to help their child. Yeah. So they are, or they're doing like a big research or going on some coachings or whatever, because they're really willing, to make a change here. So this is why, of course, we are like, the goal here is, to talk to local authorities or to headmasters to actually make sure that AV1 is like being offered, within the existing educational structure, because it should not be the responsibility of like a single parent, to find a solution for their sick child. So this is why, we are actually, addressing like the top structure of the educational landscape within all of the markets.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I think that I think it's interesting also how, I think, Carina, you were saying, when, if a parent has a child at home with some emotional anxiety that doesn't allow them to go to school, or some long-term illness, the stakes are so much higher. And so there definitely, if there's a solution that's going to work, there very likely would be a quicker buy-in than maybe a teacher that's thinking, I'm a really busy person. I can't put this thing into my class and add another layer of work. So I think, that seems to be one of the areas. You have been wonderful about sharing the story and also talking about this idea of absence and developing those important connections so kids feel like they're belonging. What is one thing you would want to tell our audience if they are an educator or even an organization and people are absent? What is one thing you want them not to forget? Even if they don't have the AV1, what is it about that break between, say, the workplace and an individual that can't be there and part of the team and the community, or be it a school and being part of the classroom and their peers? What is one thing you would want people just to really reflect upon in regarding this idea of absence?
To not forget that child. That child, is part of that community. It's part of that classroom. And however you want to do that, remember that child thrives on connection and belonging. And when children feel safe and they feel like they belong, the learning comes second. The learning is just, along for the ride, if you like. And I think it's very easy, not easy in that way, but when a child's not there, to kind of not remember to sort of say hello or pick up the phone, because it's you've got 30 other children, you know what it's like. But I just think that connection and that belonging and feeling included, feeling that you still do matter to that community, that's huge. And that's it in a nutshell, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, and picking up on that, I think every grown-up person should just take a moment and remember that when you're a child, school is literally the center of your everyday life, so it's not only about like lessons and being good at school, but it's really the center of your everyday life. So this is why I fully agree with you, Simone.
Thank you, love.
For our audience, the show notes, you have links, and of course you can connect with Carina and Simone through their LinkedIn. And there's also quite a lot of information, I know, for international schools that Carina put in there. And also, if you have any questions or just would like to learn more about this work, just go to the show notes. I want to thank again, as always, the audience for your feedback and people going through our LinkedIn group and sharing comments and ideas. And we always so appreciate having your feedback and ideas for guests, for people saying, hey, I have something. We're always excited to connect with people from around the world. Carina and Simone, thank you so much for your time. And it's so nice that I actually bumped into one of these and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I was like, I think I'm going to go and reach out. And Carina, very kindly, I went to your contact and bingo. A few days later, Carina wrote back. So thank you, Carina. And I so appreciate both of you for being part of this conversation. And to our audience, we look forward to catching up next time. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.